Lucy Gray Baird, the icon, the legend herself, is arguably one of the most ominous characters in the world of Suzanne Collins. She is charming and mysterious. Everyone's constantly theorizing whether she's alive or dead. I don't think that was the point of Lucy Gray, and I think Suzanne has had another sort of meaning for Lucy Gray since the beginning of her introduction. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. To understand Lucy Gray as a full character, let's start from what we do know about her that is fact. Her full name is Lucy Gray Baird. Her cousins are Maud Ivory and Barb Azure Baird. The three of them are amongst members of the Covey singing group. The Covey is a nomadic group, and the Covey consisted of Maud Ivory, Lucy Gray Baird, Lucy Gray's mother, father, oldest sibling, and middle sibling. So she had two older siblings beforehand, and they used to travel throughout the country of Panem amidst the first rebellion, but it's unknown where they originated from. We also do know that a few years before the book of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Lucy Gray and her family and other members of the Covey were rounded up by peacekeepers. Her father was shot for trying to speak out and trying to fight for being rounded up. According to Lucy Gray herself, her mother got her head broken by peacekeepers for trying to keep her family together. Her oldest two siblings died as well, leaving Lucy Gray as the only surviving member of her own immediate family, and leaving her and her cousins to remain in the Covey. Lucy Gray also says that since they were the only survivors, they were trapped in District 12, where they were raised by an unnamed man who didn't really care for them, but he didn't really mess with them either. After the man died of a disease called the black lung, the Covey made their living by doing musical performances. At some point while she was performing, she meets Billy Top. And while we'll get into that a little bit later, I wanted to establish the groundwork for what I'm about to say. So all those things I mentioned previously we know as facts. But the thing is about Lucy Gray is that because she is somewhat ominous as a character, she herself is a mystery. A lot of the times while I was reading the book, I always had the feeling never to trust 100% of everything that she says. But the one thing I do notice about her character is while you may not be able to fully trust everything that she says, you can trust her lyrics. You see, a lot of the truth of Lucy Gray lies within her music. By using her music, she expresses herself and expresses her true desires, but also doesn't make it personal to any one specific person, therefore not leaving her as vulnerable, at least until she interacts with Billy Top and Snow. Lucy Gray also comes across as a very confident young lady, but it is in her songs you notice how she truly feels. Now, I could be biased here, but as someone who writes lyrics, it's very hard for you to hide yourself when you are creating music. A lot of the times the lyrics speak to very personal events, how one is feeling, or how one wants to be represented. So I wanted to use this opportunity to break things down and to delve into Lucy Gray herself. Lucy Gray has a lot of different songs for a lot of different occasions. The two most interesting songs that I wanted to use this opportunity to dissect are The Ballad of Lucy Gray Baird and Lucy Gray. While I was researching this, I was trying to see the origin of the song Lucy Gray, only to my surprise, the song is actually not just a song within the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but was originally a poem that was written by William Wordsworth in 1799. In the original poem, Lucy Gray was a young little girl. She lived in the wild moor with her parents. She had no friends, and her father told her to go to the town to go find her mother. Unbeknownst to her, a snowstorm arises as she is on the way to the town, and as a result, she dies. Well, at least we think she dies. Her body is never found, and her footsteps stop at a certain point. And I quote, the father says, "Tonight will be a stormy night. You to the town must go, and take a lantern, child, to light your mother through the snow." Lucy Gray replies and says, "That, father, I will gladly do. 'Tis scarcely afternoon. The minster clock has just struck 2, and yonder is the moon." These verses tell us the story from a more active point of view and letting us know the interaction between Lucy Gray and her father, how he tells her to go find their mother and she gladly agrees as the young child she is. After this, Lucy Gray takes a lantern in her hand and goes on to try and find her mother, and so it continues. "Not blither is the mountain row, with many a wanton stroke. Her feet disperse the powdery snow that rises up like smoke. The storm came on before its time and wandered up and down, and many a hill did Lucy climb, but never reached the town. The wretched parents all that night went shouting far and wide, but there was neither a sound nor sight to serve them for a guide. It is within these lines that I noticed something, and I might be going a little too far, and this might be me officially being unhinged, but bear with me. So within these lines, it gives us a scenery of what preluded Lucy Gray's death. How she's walking through a snowstorm and kicking her feet through the snow, but unbeknownst to her, there is a storm that is brewing, specifically a snowstorm. But she keeps on walking instead of turning back. She climbs the hills, desperate to go see her mother, and it is in that snowstorm that she continues on, in which she dies. Now, this might be me going a little too far, but I think it is very interesting that this innocent child not only dies within nature, but also dies within the harshness of a snowstorm. And the Lucy Gray Baird that we know, even though she is presumably dead, again, we're not sure, dies or presumably dies at the hands of a snow. And with this ever famous saying of snow lands on top, there might be some sort of correlation here. These two versions of Lucy Gray, they both meet their ends at the hands of snow, whether it's in a figurative sense or in a literal sense. Not only this, but if Lucy Gray died in a snowstorm, you can also say that snow landed on top, which is quite unfortunate in this context, but the poem then continues, end quote. At daybreak on a hill they stood that overlooked the moor, and thence they saw the bridge of wood a furlong from their door. They wept, and turning homeward cried, in heaven we shall meet, when in the snow the mother spied the print of Lucy's feet. Then downwards from the steep hill's edge they cracked the footmarks small, and through the broken hawthorn edge, and by the long stone wall. And then an open field they crossed, the marks were still the same. They tracked them on, nor ever lost, and to the bridge they came. To end it all, the poem continues and says, yet some maintain that to this day she is a living child, that you may see sweet Lucy Gray upon the lonesome wild. Oh, ever rough and the smooth she trips along, and never looks behind, and sings a solitary song that whistles in the wind. I think these last two verses are very important, and they help tie in the point that I was making earlier, that in this poem it says that you may see sweet Lucy Gray upon the lonesome wild, as we know that Lucy Gray Baird herself has always lived within nature, right? She's very free-spirited, and I wouldn't go out to call her wild, but she is definitely her own free spirit and her own person. I mean, this is one of the reasons that her and Snow had an argument later in the chapters in the books, because she was very much a person who adored the idea of freedom and being free from the idea of the capital and the districts, versus Snow, who was the complete opposite and relished in control. To mention singing a solitary song that whistles in the wind, we know that Lucy Gray's sort of gift is through song. It is through music. She creates the Hanging Tree song, passed down amongst generations within District 12. For Lucy Gray and for Lucy Gray Baird, their spirits live within the winds of their dwellings and their surroundings. I'm not the best poem analyst, but I thought that theme definitely existed, and that's the best way I could sort of describe it. In fact, in one of the lines, her footprints are not seen any longer up to a certain point. Similar to how Lucy Gray's body is never found within the end of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It might be a little bit of a reach, but I think it is such an interesting choice that Suzanne Collins has made. And it tells me that if she truly took inspiration from this poem, then that meant she intended for Lucy Gray to be an ominous figure from the beginning. At least I personally speculate so. If you look at it from a deeper context, this poem is also about child loss. And I also wanted to note that I noticed this theme in Suzanne's work, where she uses a lot of other plays and literary works as a basis for her characters, just like Coriolanus and Sejanus. That is what I think sets out The Hunger Games from other YA novels or books, is the sheer depth of its own characters and its parallels to our normal everyday society. I mean, she does this with Coriolanus. Now, I don't want to go too much into Coriolanus because this is a Lucy Gray video. Moving on from this poem is another actual song called The Ballad of Lucy Gray Baird. That in itself is not poetry, but is a song written by Lucy Gray, which also tells us so much about her personality and her truth. But there's first something else I want to tackle to be able to land my point. One of the reasons I said earlier that I do not fully trust Lucy Gray is that sometimes the things that she says do not really make sense to me. For example, early in the books when Coriolanus meets Lucy Gray for the first time, he brings her a rose. Then she says that her mother used to bathe her in roses and milk and she eats the rose. Actually, funny enough, one of the people who watched one of my previous videos mentioned that roses are actually quite common in the districts. I could not find this anywhere in the books to help me support this, to make this point, because my initial thought was, how is it possible that in the country of Panem, where the districts are suffering, that roses and milk would be an easy commodity for someone to take a bath with? I want you to understand how much a bath of milk would possibly cost someone. Considering the fact that the Covey were performers, I'm guessing during the time of Panem that performers were not making that huge, incredulous amount of money to be able to afford huge bottles of milk to be able to bathe in. That just doesn't make any sense. And when Lucy Gray says that, that is the first minute I start to distrust some of the things that she says. I understand that the Covey does separate themselves and they call themselves a nomadic group. However, the truth is that for as far as we've seen in the country of Panem, we haven't really seen that many sources of other lands outside of Panem. Snow himself says that there is no such thing. Is this fact? We're not necessarily sure. But if that is true and Panem is the only country in this dystopian world, how is it possible that the Covey could come from such a faraway place and land in Panem? To me personally, I personally feel that the Covey were definitely born district. I don't know what it is in my spirit, but until I see full actual evidence of it, I cannot believe that. I personally think that the Covey wanted to separate themselves in some shape or form because it's just easier to. That way they have a sort of mystique, and also being a performer, you definitely have to decorate yourself a little bit with your own story. So I wouldn't be surprised if the actual Covey were born from different districts and somehow disbanded together. It's a possibility. Now, this will trickle down into how I personally see Lucy Gray and her relationships with men. Now, the thing is that Billy Tope also has some alternative opinions about Lucy Gray, of course, since he is not necessarily the greatest person in this book. In fact, he's quite an asshole who cheats on Lucy Gray. But one thing that he does say when Billy Tope has a confrontation with Lucy Gray and the rest of the Covey, he tells Snow that she's full of surprises, a sort of warning to Snow, which I never really understood, and I'm not necessarily keen to take Billy Tope's opinion simply because he found it so easy to be able to discard Lucy Gray, and is one of the reasons why she ended up in the reaping, thanks to his two-timing with Mayfair. But like I said previously, I truly think Lucy Gray's truth lies within her music, and that is why I wanted to analyze the Ballad of Lucy Gray, because it is in these lyrics that you actually see how she truly feels about the situation. In the first verse, she says, in quote, "When I was a babe, I fell in the holler. When I was a girl, I fell into your arms. We fell on hard times and we lost our bright color. You went to the dogs and I lived by my charm. I danced with my dinner, spread kisses like honey. You stole and you gambled and I said you should. We sang for our suppers and we drank up our money. Then one day you left, saying I was no good." Now the thing is, here, Lucy Gray admits that she fell for Billy Tope as a young girl. Considering the fact that she's 16 at the time of the Ballad of Sunbirds and Snakes, when she fell for Billy, I'm guessing she was around 13 to 14 years old, which again emphasizes she is a teenager, a young teenager, when she first got into her first relationship. In the stanza, she describes how they fell on hard times, which one can presume were perhaps the dark days, and how they had to do different things to survive. In the next verse, Lucy Gray mentioned that she had to dance for her dinner and spread her kisses like honey. Now, you could see this in two different ways. The most fair interpretation is that this could have meant that she just had to constantly perform, mostly with the Covey, to be able to afford to eat. But the darker interpretation of this is that she might have had to do multiple things more than performing. She might have even had to sell her own self to be able to afford food. This is also another theme and links her to Tigris, who also had to sell her own body to be able to make sure her family could eat. Again, Lucy Gray mentions how she just couldn't let Maud Ivory and the rest of the Covey starve. This is also helped by the fact that in chapter 25, Lucy Gray tells Snow that what Billy Tope was implying was not true, that she sometimes had to flirt with people as part of her job, but she was loyal. And she kind of goes into this tangent about it, and you can see that this is actually somewhat traumatic for her. Even though she might have had to do alternative things to survive, she still had loyalty to this man who had no loyalty to her to begin with. But Also, the trauma of having to fend for yourself at such a young age in such horrible times and still have this person call you names and tell you that you're no good has to do a number on you for sure, especially as a young girl. And we continue to explore this in her song. In the next verse, she says, well, all right, I'm bad, but then you're no prize either. All right, I'm bad, but then that's nothing new. You say you won't love me, I won't love you either. Just let me remind who I am to you, because I'm the one who looks out when you're leaping. I'm the one who knows how you were brave, and I'm the one who heard what you said sleeping. I'll take that and more when I go to my grave. If you look at the lyrics of her song, she also details a deeper feeling of betrayal from Billy Taupe. See, their fallout was more than just of a boy who tried to shuffle two girls and it ended up going badly. From these lines, it seems that both her and Billy Taupe were together and they survived together, and she found a kinship and a deep connection, well, at least what she thought was a deep connection with him. And then he switches up on her and then starts telling her that she is in fact no good, when they both had to do horrible things to be able to survive such a dark period. It almost seems like that is not the first time she's heard such a thing. That is not the first time that he has degraded her. That is not the first time that he has said something horrible to her, and she somewhat accepts it, but at the same time, she reminds him of who she is, which I think as a young girl, having to endure all of that and still having some sort of self-confidence and self-esteem and having to build that on your own is quite admirable. Now, I don't think Lucy Gray was a perfect character either. I do think that with a lot of characteristics and everything that she's had to go through, she's also got a little bit of a manipulative side to her as well, and she has a deeper understanding of how to use manipulation to get her way, or at least portray a certain image about herself. I definitely do think that is a certain possibility. She knows how to flirt and to charm her way to get what she needs and what she wants. So I definitely do acknowledge that possibility. I don't think that she just outright used and wanted to discard Snow, because some people really have some alternative takes like that. In my personal opinion, I think she needed to do what she had to do to be able to survive. Did she have feelings for Snow? Well, in the books, Snow, when he sees Lucy Gray, is immediately infatuated with her. He's obsessed with understanding her because she's completely different from anything that he's ever seen before. So I definitely think at the beginning, Lucy Gray definitely noticed this and used it to her advantage. But again, I don't think this was such a prevalent thing where she was manipulating him. I really think she just noticed, okay, this boy likes me. Let's see how far this can go. Because let's not forget, Coriolanus, even though he liked how she looked and he was infatuated by her, he also saw her as a ticket to winning the games. That's one of the reasons that he wanted to reach out to her. He just wanted her to be able to trust him so that he could win. It's not like he was this innocent boy who was manipulated by a girl. No, they both had their own mutual understanding that they needed each other to survive. And that's why I called them in my previous video, when I was describing the actual events, I called them the iconic performing duo of Padam, because it's so interesting that when Snow was thrown into the animal cages, that he immediately goes into performance mode with Lucy Gray, and they both put on this amazing show for the Capitol, even though they have not known each other for at least more than 10 to 15 minutes. It also shows how Lucy Gray has had to put on a persona to survive. She's clearly scared and is anticipating death, and yet in that moment she's strong enough to be able to smile for the camera, and she's covered in filth, but she still continues. At the same time, because of this mutual understanding, a lot of people do theorize that they have some sort of trauma bond with one another, which is also similar to what she had with Billy Taupe. They both had to survive in traumatic circumstances, and that brought them together. But once those traumatic circumstances were over, it separated them, because their foundations were never built on true love in the first place. They were built on needing to survive, infatuation, also a little bit of lust, and other things that are not true love. In fact, a lot of the times she had nothing in common with Snow, but because of how the games were and because she was stuck in the Capitol and had no freedom of her own and she thought she was going to die, all those emotions became heightened, and so what they thought they had would become easily dissolved when she was out of the Capitol. A lot of people do say that there is a sign that she never truly liked him, and that was the fact that when Snow became a peacekeeper and he was in District 12, that he would end up constantly looking for Lucy Gray, but she never really asked about him. I would counter or argue that. First of all, we don't know or have enough evidence of that. And secondly, think of it like this. You're a young 16-year-old girl with no family besides the people you know as the Covey. Your parents are dead. Your siblings are dead. And what you call home has just been disrupted. You have just been thrown into an arena where you've had to actually kill someone to be able to survive. And it was the most traumatic few days of your life. The first thing you do when you leave such a situation is not to look for the possibility of this rich capital kid that he might like you enough to want to find you in the district. No, what you do is you go back to your family with your money and try and continue surviving. So I'm not surprised that she would not go looking for Snow when she has other priorities. Another theme that I wanted to talk about was the theme of sex work. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube, so I hope I don't get demonetized, but I noticed this theme again with Tigris and Lucy Gray, and also a lot of young girls in Panem, and how they get sort of mistreated or dismissed because of the minute that there's a hint that Lucy Gray might have had to do horrible things to survive, Snow just kind of pushes it away, and he does not ask her about it. Not that he should ask her or interrogate her about it, but instead comfort her. I mean, he doesn't even do this with his own cousin Tigris, who sacrificed herself literally so that they can be able to eat and survive. Instead, with Tigris, he just has a weird disdain for it, and then he thinks of it as a sort of stain on the Snow family name. And I also think that Tigris, as a result, perhaps saw herself in Lucy Gray, which is one of the reasons that she was so fair to her in the beginning. But it's also really concerning the fact that Snow can discard these two women and the sacrifices that they've made and turn around in the same breath and also do this exact same thing to people like Finnick, clearly continuing the cycle of abuse. And the fact that Lucy Gray has had relationships with these kinds of men, the one calls her names, expects her to be loyal, and still publicly disrespects her by dating someone else, therefore bringing her to her death. The other one completely dismisses it and doesn't even say anything and is more infatuated with the idea of controlling her. I mean, talk about horrible relationships. So if anything, I'm not sure if Lucy Gray is a master manipulator. I personally think that she was a child, a 16-year-old girl who was thrust into the situation that she didn't ask for and had to do what she needed to do to survive. When I listened to the book, I definitely thought that Lucy Gray was still alive for sure. It's just too easy of a death. There was no body found. There's too many elements that scream that she could have possibly survived, at least for a little bit, before she would eventually die. But I don't know. You guys can let me know your opinions down in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have more theories or any opinions about Lucy Gray, or if you disagree with my opinions, that's okay. Let me know down in the comments below, and let's have a fun discussion. I will say I'm super grateful for you guys watching this Hunger Games series. It's really opened me up to alternative opinions, but also this little community that we have where we can just discuss these amazing books and characters and give our unhinged essays about them. I absolutely adore that. So if you guys would like to follow me on my other social media, my links and everything are in the description down below. And I listened to you guys on the last previous video for Sejanus Plinth. Supernova Walk will be coming soon, so stay tuned for that. This was super fun, and I think I will just be taking a break from the whole Hunger Games thing because I feel like I've done more than enough. But if I have any more thoughts on the Hunger Games, I will definitely be posting and letting you guys know in my community tab as well. Thank you all so much for your positive comments and your thoughts and ideas. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye.